The crystalline beings of the Catherian collective stood frozen in their great crystal towers, watching orange flames consume their outer colonies. Their beautiful blue worlds, which had known peace for 1,000 years, now burned like dying stars. Ships fell from the sky like broken glass, and the screams of their people echoed through the quantum networks that connected their minds. Ambassador. Veltara pressed her transparent hands against the viewing portal of the Galactic Council station. Her body, made of living crystal, flickered between blue and red as waves of panic and desperation washed over her. She had never felt fear like this before. None of her people had. The Vorthok Empire had come from the dark space between galaxies, like a plague of locusts. Their black ships moved through space like hungry sharks, and wherever they went, entire civilizations simply disappeared. The Catherians had always believed their advanced energy shields would protect them. They were wrong. The Vorthok broke. Through our defenses in just 3 weeks, Veltara whispered to herself, her voice cracking like breaking glass. 3 weeks to destroy what we built over 10,000 years. She had watched the battle reports with growing horror. The Vorthok didn't just defeat their enemies, they erased them completely. Planets turned into balls of molten glass. Space stations became floating graveyards. Entire species vanished, as if they had never existed. The Great Council chamber buzzed. With nervous energy, as representatives from hundreds of species gathered, the Altarians whispered among themselves, their golden skin shimmering with fear. The cetaceans floated in their water tanks, their massive forms trembling. Even the proud vegan warrior poet seemed smaller than usual. Veltara stepped forward. To the central speaking platform, her legs shook as she walked, leaving tiny crystal fragments on the floor behind her. She had practiced this speech 100 times, but now the words felt like poison in her mouth. Honored representatives, she began, her voice echoing through the chamber. The Catherian collective faces complete extinction. Our fleets are destroyed. Our shields are broken. Our people are dying. The chamber fell silent. Every species present knew about the Vorthok's advance, but hearing it from a survivor made it real. The war was no longer something happening to distant worlds. It was coming for all of them. We have tried everything, Veltara continued, her crystal form now glowing bright red with desperation. Our best scientists, our most advanced weapons, our strongest shields, nothing works against them. They adapt to everything we throw at them. She paused, looking around the chamber at faces filled with fear and helplessness. No one wanted to say what they were all thinking. There was only one species in the galaxy that might be able to help. Them. We formally request military aid from the Terran Federation, she announced. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. The entire chamber went dead silent. Even the translation devices seemed to stutter. Everyone knew what humans were capable of, but few had ever seen them fight a real war. The humans came from a world that had tried to kill them every single day for millions of years. They had survived ice ages, volcanic eruptions, plagues, and countless wars with each other. They were the only species that had ever turned their own planet's attempts to destroy them into weapons. Veltara's crystal body began to crack under the stress. Our children are dying. Our worlds are turning to glass. If dealing with Deathworlders is our only hope, then so be it. The moment Ambassador Veltara finished speaking, the Great Council chamber erupted into chaos. Representatives from dozens of species began talking all at once, their voices mixing into a storm of fear and uncertainty. The translation devices worked overtime, turning alien languages into a babel of worry. The Altarian delegate, his golden skin, now pale with anxiety, leaned toward his neighbor. "Do you remember the Proxima incident?" he whispered, his voice barely audible above the noise. A single human mining station, just one. They held off 3 full enemy fleets for 6 months. His companion's eyes widened. But how? Mining stations don't have weapons. That's just it, the Altarian replied, his hands shaking as he pulled up classified files on his datapad. They didn't have weapons when the attack started. But humans don't see the difference between tools and weapons. They turn their mining lasers into ship killers. They used their cargo haulers as guided missiles. They even weaponized their waste disposal systems. Across the chamber, the massive cetacean ambassador floated in her water tank, her whale-like form creating ripples as she moved. Her translator crackled to life with a deep, haunting voice. "The gas giant incident during their civil war," she said slowly. "They turned an entire planet into a weapon. It's not just any planet, a gas giant. Larger than most stars." The smaller species around her looked up in horror. "That's impossible," one squeaked. "You can't weaponize a gas giant." "Tell that to the humans," the cetacean replied grimly. "They destabilized the planet's core and used it as a system-wide bomb. Wiped out an entire rebel fleet and 3 moons in the process. The explosion was visible from neighboring star systems." The vegan representative, a tall warrior poet with scars covering his arms, stood up slowly. His species had fought wars for centuries, but even they were afraid of humans. "You don't understand," he said, his voice carrying the weight of experience. "Other species fight with honor. We have rules. We have limits. We fight to win." Dast paused, looking around the chamber at the frightened faces. "Humans don't fight to win. They fight to survive. And there's a big difference between those two things." The chamber fell quiet as his words sank in. Everyone knew about Earth, the death world that had shaped humanity into what they were today. A planet where everything from the weather to the smallest creatures had tried to kill them for millions of years. Their planet tried to murder them every single day, the vegan continued. Ice ages that lasted thousands of years, volcanic eruptions that blocked out the sun, diseases that killed half their population, predators that hunted them in the dark, and somehow they not only survived, they thrived. An elderly Zephyrian delegate raised her hand, her voice trembling. "Surely they follow the same rules of warfare as the rest of us?" The vegan warrior laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Rules. Humans don't have rules in war. They have one principle: use whatever works. If they can't shoot you, they'll stab you. If they can't stab you, they'll poison you. If they can't poison you, they'll drop a moon on your head." As the debate continued, reports kept coming in from the front lines. The Vorthok Empire was moving faster than ever before. 3 more Catherian colonies had gone dark in the past hour. Entire fleets were disappearing without even sending distress calls. The council members argued, while civilizations burned. Some said humanity was too dangerous to unleash. Others argued that they were already facing extinction. What was the worst that could happen? Ambassador Veltara watched it all with growing despair. Every minute they spent debating was another minute her people died. She pressed her crystal hands against the viewing portal and watched. Distant stars wink out one by one as the Vorthok advance continued. Time was running out, and the galaxy's most feared species was their only hope. Admiral Hyanwu stood on the bridge of the UES Retribution, a massive warship that had seen action in 12 different conflicts across the galaxy. His weathered hands held the crystalline message from the Catherian collective, and his dark eyes scanned the desperate plea for help. The bridge around him hummed with quiet efficiency as his crew went about their duties. "Sir, we're getting confirmation from Terran High Command," reported Lieutenant Hyjin from her communication station. "Operation Lifeline has been approved. Full authorization for military intervention." Hyanwu nodded slowly. He'd served in the Terran Navy for 30 years, long enough to know that when aliens begged for human help, things were already beyond desperate. The Catherians were peaceful. By nature, for them to request military aid from Deathworlders meant they were facing complete extinction. "How fast did Command approve this?" he asked, setting down the message. "For hours and 17 minutes from initial contact to full authorization," Hajin replied. "That's got to be a record." The Admiral almost smiled. In the old days before humanity had ventured beyond Earth, it would have taken months of debate and committee meetings to approve military action. But humans had learned that in space, hesitation meant death. When someone needed help, you either acted fast or attended their funeral. Captain Minjun Hoyanwu called out to his second-in-command. "Deploy the 7th Expeditionary Fleet. Standard Deathworlder package." A veteran of the Outer Rim conflicts, pulled up the fleet roster on his tactical display. 12 vessels. Sir, the Retribution, as flagship for heavy cruisers, 3 destroyers, 2 support ships, and 2 specialized assault vessels. Total crew complement of 8,000. To the rest of the galaxy, 8,000 humans was a terrifying force. But by Earth's standards, this was barely a patrol group. During the resource wars, single battles had involved millions of soldiers. The fact that High Command was sending only 12 ships showed they considered this a minor operation. Our estimated travel time to Catherian space? Hyan Wu asked. 6 days at maximum burn, Minjen replied. The fleet's already moving into formation. We can launch within the hour. As the Admiral watched through the bridge's massive viewports, the other ships of the 7th Fleet began to appear. Each vessel was a testament to human engineering and their understanding of warfare. The ships looked nothing like the elegant curved vessels preferred by other species. These were angular, brutal machines designed for one purpose: winning wars. The heavy cruisers bristled with railgun turrets that could punch through a moon's crust. The destroyers carried missile pods loaded with warheads that could crack planets. The assault vessels were filled with weapons that most species would consider war crimes, but humans simply called effective. Sir, the crew is performing pre-battle preparations, reported Chief Engineer Dong Hyan. Standard Deathworlder protocols are in effect. Hyan Wu walked through the ship's corridors, observing his crew as they prepared for war. Soldiers checked their weapons with the same casual attention they might give to tying their shoes. In the medical bay, doctors prepared surgical suites while discussing weekend plans. In the engine room, technicians ran diagnostics on weapon systems while sharing photos of their families. This was what made humans different from other species. War wasn't some grand, noble enterprise to them. It was just work that needed to be done. They approached violence with the same practical efficiency they brought to everything else. Admiral called out Communications Officer Sa Young. We're receiving tactical data from Catherian survivors. The Vorthok Empire is using conventional energy weapons and particle shields. Standard galactic warfare doctrine. Hyan Wu almost felt sorry for the Vorthok. They were about to learn why humans were called Deathworlders. While other species had spent millennia perfecting energy weapons and defensive shields, humans had taken a different path. They had learned to kill each other with rocks, sticks, and whatever else they could find. Launch the fleet, he ordered. Let's go remind the galaxy what Earth's children are capable of. To the crew of the Retribution, this was just another Tuesday. But for the Vorthok Empire, it was about to become the worst day in their history. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of Catherian territory, like ghosts materializing from the void. 12 warships hung in the darkness, their angular hulls catching the light of distant stars. Unlike the graceful curved vessels that most species preferred, these ships looked like they had been carved from black metal by someone who understood only violence. Ambassador Veltara watched from her rescue shuttle as the massive flagship U.S. Retribution grew larger in the viewport. Her crystalline body trembled as she took in the ship's design. Every surface seemed to bristle with weapons. Gun turrets rotated slowly like sleeping predators. Missile pods hung from the hull like clusters of deadly eggs. Even the ship's communication arrays looked like they could be used to kill something. By the crystal gods, she whispered to herself. What have we summoned? The shuttle bay doors opened with mechanical precision, revealing a cavernous space filled with human military vehicles. Tanks that looked like they could drive through. Mountains. Aircraft that seemed designed to hunt other aircraft. Even the maintenance equipment appeared to have been weaponized somehow. As Veltara stepped out of her shuttle, her legs nearly gave out. The artificial gravity on the human ship was crushing nearly 3 times what her people were used to. But the humans around her moved like they were walking through water, their bodies perfectly adapted to the heavy environment. Commander So-young approached with smooth, predatory grace. She was tall for a human, with dark hair pulled back in. A military style and eyes that seemed to catalog every potential threat in the room. Her armor was sleek and functional, designed for combat in environments that would kill most species. Ambassador Veltara So-young said with a slight bow, "Welcome aboard the Retribution. I'm Commander So-young, and I'll be your escort during your visit." As they walked through the ship's corridors, Veltara tried to process what she was seeing. The walls were lined with weapons lockers containing devices she couldn't even identify. Tactical displays showed real-time battle scenarios that made her crystalline structure flicker with fear. Human crew members moved past them with casual efficiency, their conversations mixing technical jargon with what sounded like death threats. "Your people seem very pret," Veltara managed to say. "We've been fighting wars since before we discovered fire," Soyoung replied matter-of-factly. "It's what we do." They passed through a section where human soldiers were training. Veltara watched in fascination and horror as they practiced combat techniques that would be considered torture by most species. They fought with their bare hands, with improvised weapons, even with their teeth when necessary. But what struck her most was how relaxed they seemed about it all. "Your ships, ... Veltara began, then stopped. She couldn't find words to describe what she was feeling. "Are built for war," Soyoung finished for her. "Every bolt, every wire, every system on this ship has one purpose: to destroy our enemies and bring our people home alive." They entered a viewing lounge where Veltara could see out into space. The other ships of the 7th Fleet hung in formation around them, their weapons trained on the empty void ahead. But what really caught her attention was the casual way the human crew moved. Around them, children from other species would have nightmares about these ships. But to the humans, they were simply tools. "The Vorthok Empire has destroyed 7 civilizations," Veltara said quietly. "They adapt to every weapon, every defense. They've never been stopped." Soyoung looked out at the stars with the same expression she might use to check the weather. "They've never fought humans before, but they have shields that can deflect energy weapons. Their armor adapts to particle beams. Their ships repair themselves faster than we don't use energy weapons as primary armament," Soyoung interrupted. "We use kinetic projectiles, rocks. Essentially, very fast rocks." Veltara's crystalline form began to resonate with something between hope and terror. "You're going to fight them with rocks?" Among other things, Soyoung replied with a slight smile. "We'll handle the Vorthok. Might want to evacuate nearby systems, though, as things are about to get messy." The casual confidence in her voice made Veltara realize that she was witnessing something unprecedented in galactic history. These humans weren't just another military force. They were apex predators who had turned warfare into an art form, and they were about to remind the galaxy why Deathworlders were feared throughout the stars. The Vorthok fleet emerged from hyperspace, like a pack of hungry wolves, their black ships spreading across the star system in a formation that had terrorized the galaxy for decades. Admiral Kethfer stood on the bridge of his flagship, the massive dreadnought called Soul Render, watching the human vessels through his tactical display with cold amusement. 12 ships, he growled to his subordinates, his voice carrying the confidence of someone who had never lost a battle. "The Deathworlders send us 12 ships to face our entire battle fleet." His officers laughed, their alien voices creating a chorus of cruel anticipation.
Oh.
The Vorthok had crushed 7 civilizations in the past cycle alone. Their adaptive armor could deflect any energy weapon. Their plasma batteries could melt through any shield. They had perfected the art of galactic warfare over thousands of years. "Sir, the human vessels are maintaining formation," reported his tactical officer. "They're not even trying to spread out or take defensive positions." Kethver's massive form straightened with pleasure. "Arrogant mammals. They think their reputation will save them. Begin the assault. Standard plasma barrage. Let's melt these Deathworlders and add their skulls to our collection." Fleet opened fire with devastating precision. Hundreds of plasma cannons erupted simultaneously, turning the space between the fleets into a storm of superheated death. The energy beams, each capable of melting through a moon's crust, struck the human ships in waves of brilliant destruction. Kethfer waited for the familiar sight of enemy shields collapsing and hulls turning to molten slag. Instead, something impossible happened. The human ships absorbed the plasma fire like sponges soaking up water. Their hulls glowed briefly with heat, then returned to their original dark color. "What?" Kethfer snarled. "How are they?" His question was answered. by the human response. The 12 human vessels fired back, but not with energy weapons. Instead, they launched what appeared to be simple metal projectiles. To Kethver's sensors, they looked like oversized bullets, primitive kinetic rounds that any civilized species had abandoned centuries ago. Kinetic weapons? His tactical officer laughed. They're using rocks against our adaptive armor? This is the first projectile struck a Vorthok destroyer at 20% the speed of light. The ship didn't explode, it simply ceased to exist. One moment it was there, the next it was an expanding cloud of superheated plasma and metal fragments. The kinetic round had hit with the force of a small nuclear weapon. Admiral Hianwu watched from his command chair aboard the Retribution as more Vorthok ships disappeared under the railgun barrage. His expression remained calm, almost bored, as if he were watching a training exercise rather than a battle that would determine the fate of civilizations. "Impressive," he said quietly. "Their armor adapts to energy weapons, but they never learned to stop a chunk of metal moving at relativistic speeds." Captain Minjun checked his tactical display. "Shh, sir. Their armor is trying to adapt, but there's nothing to adapt to. It's just kinetic energy." The Vorthok fleet began to break formation as more ships vanished under the human assault. Their mighty dreadnoughts, which had crushed entire fleets, crumpled like tin cans before weapons that were essentially evolved versions of ancient human slingshots. "This is impossible," Kethver screamed, watching his unstoppable fleet being torn apart by what his ancestors would have called rocks. "They're using primitive weapons." But that was exactly the point. While the galaxy had spent millennia perfecting energy weapons and defensive shields, humans had never forgotten the simple truth that had kept them alive on their death world. If you hit something hard enough and fast enough, it dies. "Target their command vessel," Admiral Hianwu ordered calmly, his voice carrying the same tone he might use to order lunch. "Let's introduce ourselves properly." The Retribution's main railgun swiveled toward the Soul Render, the massive Vorthok dreadnought, a ship that had never been damaged in battle, suddenly found itself staring down the barrel of a weapon that could accelerate a telephone pole to a significant fraction of light speed. Kethver's last thought was that the humans had just reminded the galaxy why Deathworlders were the most dangerous species in the universe. They didn't fight with honor or follow the rules of civilized warfare. They fought to win. The Vorthok fleet regrouped in the outer system, their remaining commanders struggling to understand what had just happened. In less than 10 minutes, they had lost 30% of their battle fleet to what appeared to be primitive kinetic weapons. Ships that had conquered entire star systems were being destroyed by glorified rocks. Admiral Kethver's replacement, scarred veteran named Thulgrim, stood on the bridge of the new flagship with his claws extended in rage. His species had ruled through fear for millennia, and these mammals had just made them look like fools in front of the entire galaxy. "Deploy the siege weapons," he snarled to his weapons officer. "If these humans want to play with toys, we'll show them what real power looks like." The massive planet crackers emerged from the Vorthok fleet like ancient gods of destruction. Each weapon was the size of a small moon, bristling with energy collectors that could drain the power from entire stars. These were the tools that had turned proud civilizations into floating debris. The ultimate expression of Vorthok military might, the weapons began to charge, drawing energy from the system's star itself. Space around them warped and twisted as gravity wells formed and collapsed. The very fabric of reality seemed to bend under the strain of containing such devastating power. "Target the human flagship," Thulgrim ordered. "Want to see these Deathworlders turned into their component atoms." Down the bridge of the Retribution, Captain Minjun watched the charging process with professional interest. He had seen planet crackers before during the Outer Rim conflicts, though never ones quite this large. His tactical display showed the energy buildup in real time, calculating exactly how long they had before the weapons reached full charge. "Impressive," he said to Admiral Hianwu. "They're pulling power directly from the star. Those weapons could probably crack a small planet in half." The Admiral nodded slowly, his eyes fixed on the tactical display. "How long until they're ready to fire?" "Approximately 47 minutes at current charge rate," reported Lieutenant Hyjin. Sir, should we begin evasive maneuvers? Instead of answering, Hyun-woo turned to his captain with a slight smile. Minjan, remember what we learned during the siege of Titan Base? Captain Minchan's grin widened as he understood that the bigger they are, the harder they fall. Exactly. Permission. To demonstrate human engineering? Granted, sir. Show them what we do with asteroids. Minjan activated the ship's long-range sensors, scanning the asteroid belt that circled the system's fourth planet. Thousands of rocks floated in the darkness, ranging from pebbles to mountain-sized chunks of metal and ice. To most species, they were just space debris. To humans, they were ammunition. Helm, take us to the asteroid belt, Minjan ordered. Navigation, I want a trajectory plot for every rock bigger than a house. The human fleet moved with predatory grace toward the asteroid field. The Vorthok watched in confusion as their enemies seemed to be retreating toward a bunch of floating rocks. Thulgrim laughed, thinking the humans were trying to hide among the asteroids like scared children. Let them cower in the rocks, he growled. Our weapons will vaporize everything in that sector. But the humans weren't hiding. They were shopping. The UES Retribution positioned itself next to a particularly large asteroid, a chunk of iron and nickel roughly the size of a city block. The ship's industrial fabricators, normally used for ship repairs, began working on the rock with mechanical precision. They carved it into a perfect sphere, balanced for optimal flight characteristics. Target acquired, Minjun announced. One asteroid, approximately 50,000 tons, composition primarily iron-nickel. The ship's main mass driver, a weapon designed to accelerate projectiles to incredible speeds locked onto the prepared asteroid. Energy that could power a small city for a year began charging into the weapon's coils. Acceleration to 30% light speed in 3.2.1. Fire. The asteroid disappeared in a flash of blue light, accelerated to velocities that turned it into a relativistic projectile. At 30% the speed of light, the rock carried more kinetic energy than most nuclear weapons. It crossed the distance to the Vorthok fleet in seconds. The Vorthok flagship Sol rendered 2 didn't have time to react. The asteroid struck the massive dreadnought amidships, and the result was spectacular. The ship's adaptive armor, designed to deflect energy weapons, crumpled like paper before the unstoppable force of accelerated matter. The explosion was visible from 3 star systems away. The flagship, along with 2 escort vessels that happened to be too close, simply evaporated in a flash of relativistic energy. Thulgrim's last thought was pure disbelief. The humans had just turned space rocks into weapons of mass destruction. Their planet crackers, so feared by the galaxy, suddenly seemed primitive by comparison. The remaining Vorthok ships watched in horror as the human fleet began selecting more asteroids. There were thousands of rocks in the belt, and apparently, the humans saw each one as a potential weapon. They had just learned why you never fight. Someone who grew up on a world where everything was trying to kill them. The remaining Vorthok fleet scattered like frightened animals after watching their flagship get obliterated by a weaponized asteroid. What had started as a simple conquest had turned into a nightmare that defied everything they understood about warfare. Admiral Han-woo watched their panicked retreat with the calm satisfaction of a predator who had just proven his dominance. They're falling back to the Kepler system, reported Lieutenant Haijin, her fingers dancing across the tactical display. Looks like they're trying to regroup near the gas giant. Good, Han-woo replied, settling back in his command chair. Let them think they can escape. Helm, plot a pursuit course, but take us through the Proxima gravity well first. Captain Minjan raised an eyebrow. Sir, that's going to add 6 hours to our travel time. Exactly, the Admiral smiled. But it's also going to give us a velocity boost that will make our next attack much more interesting. The human fleet began a complex dance through space that would have been impossible for most species to execute. Using the gravity wells of dead stars and massive planets, they slingshot their ships to incredible speeds. What looked like a longer route was actually a tactical masterpiece. They were turning the universe itself into a weapon. The Vorthok commanders watched in confusion as the human ships seemed to take the long way around. They used the time to strengthen their formations and prepare their remaining siege weapons. Surely these Deathworlders weren't stupid enough to attack a fortified position. They were wrong. The human fleet emerged from the gravity, slingshot moving at speeds that should have been impossible for ships of their size. They came screaming out of the void like vengeful spirits, their velocity so high that the Vorthok sensors barely had time to register their presence. "Incoming human vessels," screamed the Vorthok tactical officer. "They're moving a T. That can't be right. Now they're moving at 12% light speed." The Vorthok tried to intercept, but their ships were positioned for a defensive battle, not a high-speed chase. The humans used their incredible velocity to perform hit-and-run attacks, striking like lightning and disappearing before the enemy could respond. But speed was just the beginning. As the battle moved into the Kepler system, Admiral Hyenwu began. To demonstrate why humans were considered the most dangerous species in the galaxy, he turned the star itself into a weapon. "Lieutenant Haijin, what's the status of that solar flare we detected earlier?" he asked casually. Haijin checked her instruments. "It's building toward a Class X eruption, sir. It should peak in about 20 minutes. Perfect timing. Navigation. I want us positioned to use that flare as a slingshot and prepare the magnetic field generators." The Vorthok fleet had taken position near the gas giant, thinking the massive planet would provide cover. Instead, the humans turned it into a trap. As the solar flare erupted from the star's surface, the human ships used their magnetic field generators to guide the stream of charged particles directly at the enemy formation. "Impossible?" shrieked the Vorthok commander as his ships were bombarded. "By a weaponized solar flare. They're controlling stellar phenomena." But the humans weren't done. As the Vorthok fleet tried to escape the solar bombardment, they made a fatal mistake. They used the gas giant's gravity to boost their escape velocity. The humans had been counting on this. "They're using the planet's gravity well to accelerate," observed Captain Minjun. "And that's exactly what we want," Hyenwu replied. "Weapons target the gas giant's upper atmosphere with kinetic rounds. Let's give them a boost they'll never forget." The human railguns fired into the gas giant's atmosphere, creating massive explosions that sent shockwaves through the planet's gravitational field. The Vorthok ships, already committed to their escape trajectory, were caught in the resulting gravitational chaos. "They're adapting their tactics, sir," Lieutenant Haijin reported as she watched the enemy formation break apart. "The remaining ships are trying to scatter in different directions." Gudhaeonwu replied with the same tone he might use to comment on the weather. "So are we." The battle became a three-dimensional chess game played across multiple star systems. The humans used pulsars as navigation beacons, turned asteroid fields into obstacle courses, and somehow made the Vorthok's own momentum work against them at every turn. The Vorthok had been trained to fight conventional battles with energy weapons and defensive shields, but the humans fought like their homeworld had taught them, with creativity, adaptation, and the understanding that everything in the universe could be weaponized. If you were clever enough, every time the Vorthok thought they had found a safe position, the humans found a way to turn their environment against them. They were learning why Deathworlders were feared throughout the galaxy, not just because they were tough, but because they could think their way out of any situation. The universe itself had become their weapon, the last remnants of the once mighty Vorthok fleet huddled together in the shadow of a dying moon, their ships damaged and their crews broken. What had started as a routine conquest had turned into the worst military disaster in their empire's history. Of the 300 vessels that had begun the campaign, only 47 remained operational. Admiral Thulgrim, now commanding from a badly damaged cruiser, stared at his tactical display with hollow eyes. His species had ruled through fear for over 2,000 years, crushing anyone who dared to oppose them. Now they were trapped like rats in a maze, waiting for the final blow from the human Deathworlders. "Sir, the human fleet is approaching," his tactical officer reported, his voice barely above a whisper. They're not firing." Fulgrim's claws extended in confusion. Throughout the battle, the humans had shown no mercy, no hesitation. They had turned stars into weapons and made the universe itself fight against the Vorthok. Why would they stop now when victory was within their grasp? The answer came in the form of a transmission from the human flagship. Admiral Hyanwoo's face appeared on the screen, his expression as peaceful as if he were inviting them to dinner rather than accepting their surrender. "Vorthach commanders," he said in a voice that carried absolute authority. "You have fought bravely, but this conflict is over. I'm offering you terms for immediate surrender. Your crews will be spared, and you will be allowed to return to your home territories." Thulgrim's massive form shook with rage and disbelief. "You... You're offering us mercy? After we destroyed 7 civilizations? After we came to exterminate your allies? I'm offering you a choice," Hyanwoo replied simply. "Surrender now, or face the consequences of continued resistance." The Vorthok admiral laughed bitterly. "And why should we trust the word of Deathworlders? Your species is known for its violence," because Hyanwoo said with a slight smile. "I want you to carry a message back to your empire, and dead messengers can't deliver messages." Within hours, the surviving Vorthok commanders found themselves aboard human vessels, their hands bound, but their lives intact. Commander Soyoung escorted them through the corridors of the UES Retribution, past displays of human military technology that made their own weapons look like children's toys. "This is impossible," muttered one of the Vorthok officers as they passed a weapons laboratory. "Your ships are too small to contain this much firepower." "Our ships are built for efficiency," Soyoung replied. "We learned long ago that bigger isn't always better. On our homeworld, the smallest predators were often the most deadly. They were brought to a secure briefing room where holographic displays showed the true scope of human military capabilities. The Vorthok officers watched in growing horror as classified footage revealed fleets that stretched across entire star systems, weapons that could crack planets like eggs, and defensive systems that could stop supernova explosions. "What you've encountered here," Soyoung explained to the trembling officers, "is the 7th Expeditionary Fleet. By human standards, this was a minor engagement. We have over 300 such fleets, and they represent less than 10% of our total military strength." Admiral Thulgrim's breathing became labored as the implications sank in. "You mean... this entire battle was just a patrol action?" "Correct," Soyoung nodded. "The ships you fought were designed for reconnaissance and minor conflicts. Our actual war fleets are significantly larger. The holographic display showed a single human dreadnought that dwarfed the largest Vorthok vessel. Then it revealed that Earth maintained over 50,000 such ships, with production facilities that could build more faster than any enemy could destroy them. But why?" Thulgrim asked desperately. "Why do you need so much power?" Soyoung's expression grew serious. "Because we learned something during our evolution that your species apparently missed. The best way to avoid a war is to be so terrifyingly powerful that no one dares to start one." The footage continued, showing human colonies that existed inside. The cores of active volcanoes, space stations, built around black holes, and weapons that could manipulate time itself. The Vorthok officers realized they weren't just facing another species, they were facing the apex predators of the galaxy. "The choice is yours," Soyoung concluded. "Withdraw your forces from all conquered territories and never return, or face the full might of the Terran Federation. We prefer peace, but we're very, very good at war." The message was clear. Humanity had been holding back. The galaxy's most feared empire had just been defeated by what humans considered a routine patrol. The Vorthok Empire could either accept this reality or face extinction. The surviving commanders agreed to withdraw immediately, carrying with them the knowledge that Deathworlders were not just survivors, they were the ultimate expression of controlled violence. The galaxy's balance of power had just shifted forever. 3 months after the battle that would become known as the Deathworlder intervention, the galaxy looked very different. The Catherian Collective, once facing complete extinction, now thrived under the protection of humanity's first formal alien alliance. Their crystal cities gleamed brighter than ever, and their people spoke in hushed, reverent tones about the day the humans came to save them. Ambassador Veltara stood in her rebuilt council chambers, watching ships from dozens of species arrive at the new Terran embassy. The line to request meetings with human officials stretched for light years, as civilizations that had once feared humanity now desperately sought their protection. The Altarian Republic requests a mutual defense pact, her aide reported, his crystalline voice ringing with disbelief. The Cetacean Confederation wants to establish trade agreements. Even the proud vegan warrior clans are asking for military advisors. Veltara nodded slowly. The galaxy had learned a simple truth. When the monsters are at your door, you want the bigger monster on your side. And humanity, it turned out, was the biggest monster of all. The Vorthok Empire had collapsed within weeks of their defeat. The surviving commanders had returned home with tales of human capabilities that sounded like horror stories. Entire sectors that had lived in fear of Vorthok conquest suddenly found themselves free as the Empire's forces retreated to their core worlds, too terrified to venture beyond their own borders. The Vorthok are offering unconditional surrender, Veltara's aide continued. They're requesting terms for a formal peace treaty. And the humans' response. They said they'll consider it, but only if the Vorthok provide full reparations too. All conquered species and submit to human oversight of their military forces. Veltara couldn't help but feel a sense of cosmic justice. The empire that had terrorized the galaxy for millennia was now begging for mercy from the very species they had dismissed as primitive mammals. On Earth, Admiral Hyanwu submitted his final report to the Terran High Command. The 7th Expeditionary Fleet had returned home without losing a single ship. Though their actions had fundamentally altered the balance of power in the galaxy. Minimal casualties, sir, he reported to the assembled admirals. The operation was a complete success. The Vorthok threat has been neutralized, and we've established our first formal alliance with an alien species. And the galactic response? Asked Admiral Park, the head of fleet operations. Mixed, Hyanwu replied with a slight smile. Fear, respect, and a surprising amount of requests for friendship. It seems the galaxy is ready to acknowledge that humanity deserves a seat at the table. The truth was, humanity had never wanted to conquer the galaxy. They had learned long ago that ruling others was far more trouble than it was worth. But they had also learned that sometimes you had to demonstrate strength to maintain peace. Commander So Young, now promoted to Admiral. For her role in the operation, established the first Human-Alien Relations Department. Her job was to manage the flood of diplomatic requests from species that had previously ignored Earth's existence. The Zephyrians want to establish cultural exchange programs, she reported during a briefing. The Andromedans are offering to share their star mapping technology. Even the reclusive Magellanic Clouds Collective is asking for communication protocols. The humans approached these new relationships with characteristic practicality. They offered protection to those who needed it, trade agreements to those who had something useful, and friendship to those who proved trustworthy. But they also made it clear that they expected respect in return. Ambassador Veltara found herself at the center of this new galactic order. As humanity's first alien ally, Catherians became intermediaries between Earth and the dozens of species seeking human contact. It was a role that suited her people's peaceful nature, and it gave them a purpose beyond mere survival. She begged for help from monsters, she reflected during a private moment in her gardens, only to discover that sometimes you need monsters to fight monsters. The irony wasn't lost on her. The galaxy had spent centuries fearing humanity's violent nature, only to discover that this same violence could be used to protect the innocent. The humans had proven that the children of Deathworlds don't just survive, they thrive, protect, and when necessary. They remind the universe why apex predators exist. As news of humanity's intervention spread across the galaxy, a new phrase entered the common lexicon: don't wake the humans. It wasn't a threat, it was a reminder. The Deathworlders were content to stay in their corner of the galaxy, but they were always watching, always ready to act when evil threatened the innocent. The stars themselves seemed to watch and wait, knowing that humanity had finally announced its presence to the cosmos. The galaxy had a new guardian, and for the first time in millennia. The darkness between the stars seemed a little less frightening. The age of human protection had begun.